Greetings, everybody. How is everybody today? I hope everyone is doing well. So we are live on Twitch, on YouTube, and Discord, as well as here. I'm trying to diversify my audiences and platforms as much as possible. And welcome in, Taro. Thank you for being here. I took a nap on gym equipment. Does that count? Apparently it does. So today has been a tough day, and I do apologize for starting the reading an hour late. Let's just say a lot of people say they're doing the work, but actually they're in it for either the gifts or their own image or things like that. Regardless of what drama is going on elsewhere, I am here for the work. I am here for... That has always been my vibe. I have been on this app for 5 years, and my content has never changed. So, regardless of what is going on elsewhere, you can always look forward to having me as your friendly neighborhood educator. And yeah, let's be there for each other as a community, and let us understand that we are fighting Nazis. We are fighting people who think that we should not have rights. So we will hang in there. Thank you. We will keep on fighting. We will keep on doing what we need to do. And welcome, Lime Gem. So last week we stopped at page 81, talking about the system of racism, where the writer, Reni Eddo-Lodge, took up an internship, which was very hard to do because a lot of internships, especially in the first world, are unpaid. Media internships rely on nepotism, knowing somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, and whether you have a network already in the profession. And she took this unpaid internship, having to work on a shop, and fortunate that her family lived nearby so that she could actually do the internship unpaid, and she didn't have rent to pay. But she was talking about positive, yeah. It's not that much of a thick boy. It's fairly average. The other one we're reading is a bit of a thick boy. But she was talking about positive discrimination. And positive discrimination, obviously, we had this discussion about it, saying positive discrimination is Black Economic Empowerment, or BEE as it's known in South Africa, employment equity, or affirmative action, as it's known in many places. Affirmative action, Black economic empowerment, and employment equity is not about turning the whole place into a place for marginalized people at the expense of those people who are either already there or white people who have had the negative discrimination at their behest for centuries. Instead, simply about reflecting the society the organization serves. And so we get back into it. Structural racism is never a cause of innocent and pure persecuted people of color versus white people intent on evil and malice. Rather, it is about how Britain's relationship with race infects and this makes us feel progressive. But this claim not to see race is tantamount to compulsory assimilation. Now, the idea of compulsory assimilation, we've spoken about assimilation in terms of how assimilation, my blackness had been politicized against my will, but I don't want it willfully ignored in an effort to instill some sort of precarious false harmony. And, though many placate themselves with the colorblindness lie, the aforementioned drastic difference in life chances along race lines show that while it might be being preached by our institutions, it's not being practiced. We live in a society. No, honestly, RIP society, because society is definitely seen as, by default, white. And when you break it down, the expectation of assimilation means assimilation to whiteness, not assimilation to any sense of South Africanness, any sense of Americanness, any sense of Britishness. It is assimilation to whiteness because our societies are so incredibly diverse. And I would say beautifully diverse too. But did the white man come over and learn our local languages? No. Ask any white person in South Africa, hey, or European languages. They would probably say something like, oh, I know Japanese because I watch a lot of anime. They would sooner learn Japanese through anime than learn one of the local languages. And that to me is diabolical. Oh, absolutely. It was written by Thomas Jefferson. It was written in many, many places for people who were colonized to assimilate to whiteness because whiteness was seen as superior. If you read the Rudyard Kipling book, or poem, The White Man's Burden, he talks about civilizing the colonized masses by making them as white thinking, that you can achieve society by having everybody assimilate to one way of living, to one culture, to one language, etc., and that is white. Yes, absolutely. A phantasm. When we live in an age of colorblindness and fool ourselves with the lie of meritocracy, some will have to be silent in order for others to thrive, and I love that sentence. Some will have to be silent in order for others to thrive. And this is metaphorically and actually physically silent for others to thrive. Languages die when there's assimilationism. Entire cultures die when there's assimilationism. Entire kitchens are lost. Recipes that are hundreds of years old are lost when we expect assimilationism. It is a fantasy of the white man that everybody will become like him, but not quite. In 2014, I interviewed Black feminist academic Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw. If you have not read anything by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, please do. The link to my server is in my link tree, and I have a lot of Kimberly Crenshaw's work in my server, and I want to interview her, and I have requested time and time again to interview her, and she has never had the time. So, yeah, let's hope it happens one day. Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, she elaborated on the politics of colorblindness. It's this idea that to eliminate race, you have to eliminate all discourse. That's number one. The French have a right for language preservation, but they also furthered their language through colonial conquest and eradicated other languages in order for their own language to survive. Let's not forget that. Eliminate all discourse, the idea that when you talk about race, you're the real racist. Including efforts to acknowledge racial structures and hierarchies and address them, she said. It's those cosmopolitan thinking 21st century, not trying to carry the burdens of the past, and you shouldn't either, people. Along with them are the people who consider themselves left, progressive, and critical, who in some ways join up with the post-racial liberals and colorblind conservatives to say, if we really want to get beyond race, we have to stop talking about race. No, absolutely the fuck not. So on one of these videos for this reading on YouTube a couple of weeks ago, somebody, there were two commenters who said, sounds racist to me. White people, obviously, saying that this book sounds racist. They don't know what racism is because nobody's talked to them about it. They don't understand what racism is because they'd rather go on the Oxford Dictionary definition or likely they don't have a single person of color in their life who they can actually turn to and say, hey, what is this person talking about? They don't want to understand because they want to live in their, oh, I'm not racist bubble. So they are the people who say, if we really want to get beyond race, we have to stop talking about it. Oh, nice of you to say that we should stop talking about race now when your people benefited from it for centuries. It must be really nice to oppress people for hundreds of years and then tell them when and how to get over it. Oh, it does absolutely let them ignore systemic oppression. Gender abolitionism, we can racism. It starts and ends at discriminating against a person because of the color of their skin is bad, without any accounting for the ways in which structural power manifests in these exchanges. With an analysis so immature, this definition of racism is often used to silence people of color attempting to articulate the racism that we face. It is a silencing tactic. When somebody says, oh, but you're just bringing up white woman tears. Yes, of course I am. I am the number one rallier against white woman tears because I've seen people get killed over them. Twice. When people of color point this out, they're accused of being racist against white people, and the accountability avoidance continues. Colorblindness does not accept the legitimacy of structural racism or a history of white racial dominance. Repeatedly telling ourselves, and worse still, telling our children that we are all equal is a misdirected yet well-intentioned lie. We can just about recognize the overt racial segregation of old, but indulging in the myth that we are all equal now denies the economic, political, and social legacy of white tears are literally evil when born from ignorance. I would say when they're directed, when they're targeted, it's even worse. When the person knows the power of white woman tears and they still engage in it. The state of play is violently unjust. It's a social construct that was created to continue racial dominance and injustice. And the difference people of color are vaguely aware since birth is not benign. It is fraught with racism, racist stereotyping, and for women, racialized misogyny. Hello everybody, welcome in. White children are also taught not to see race, whereas children of color are taught, often with no explanation, that we must work twice as hard as our white counterparts if we wish to succeed. I would love to not work as hard as I do. There's a disparity here. Colorblindness does not get to the root of racism. Meanwhile, it is nigh on impossible for children of color to educate ourselves out of racist stereotyping, though if we accumulate enough individual wealth, we can pretend that we are no longer affected by it. That's bullshit. It's some fuckery there. Really improve the conditions which people of color are subjected to daily. In order, and what we've been engaging in recently is willful harm. As a complicit society. In order to dismantle unjust racist structures, we must see race. We must see who benefits from their race, who is disproportionately impacted by negative stereotypes about race, and to whom power and privilege is bestowed upon, earned or not, because of their race, class, or gender. Seeing race is essential to changing the system. Also, welcome in, Everett. I was thinking about you today, and I said I needed to message you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Melissa. I appreciate you being here. Oh, no, that was not intentional. This does need to be heard. Absolutely does need to be heard, because people who try to deny that racism is, who think that racism is a thing of the past, they're not engaging with our current system. They're looking at history and saying, oh, that was then. So I asked them, what date did racism end? Siddharth, please tell me you're not doing a drive-by. Sorry, my camera is not properly aimed, so I need to move this way. I am so sorry, both Twitch and YouTube. Welcome in. So yeah, if you have any questions, what is the ultra radical thing about Malcolm X? Oh, Malcolm X had many radical takes, and I would love to go into it. There is a good book that I cannot remember the name now. I will put it in the server as soon as I remember, about Malcolm X. It has just gone, absolutely gone from my head. Bless you. Yeah, gone from my head. The thing about Malcolm X is that he was always one of those people who said, you know, we cannot reason with people who have, who knowingly engage in discrimination. That we cannot engage with we cannot appeal to their moral sense, because they know what they're doing is wrong. They know that racism is some fuck shit. They know all of it. And we cannot reason with them because they have no reason. They have no reasoning, not skills, but they have no... We're not on the same playing field when it comes to our reasoning. Oh, I'm absolutely tired of MAGA's gaslighting. That is also true, Moss. That MAGA is being gaslit by their leadership. Thank you for reaching the live goal. I appreciate it. So we get into chapter 3. What is white privilege? Hi JJ, thank you for being here. When I was 4, I asked my mum when I would turn white because all the good people on TV were white. And all the villains were black and brown. I considered myself to be a good person, so I thought that I would turn white eventually. My mum still remembers the crestfallen look on my face when she told me the bad news. Neutral is white. The default is white, because we are born into an already written script that tells us what to expect from strangers due to their skin color, accent, social status. The whole of humanity is coded as white. Blackness, however, is considered other and therefore to be suspected. Those who are coded as a threat in our collective representation of humanity are not white. These messages are so powerful that 4-year-old me had already recognized them, watching TV, noticing that all the characters who looked like me were criminals at worst and sassy sidekicks at best. How can I define white privilege? It's difficult to describe an absence. Ooh, I love that. It's difficult to describe an absence. Hold on. The idea that, and this is something that I was taught in school that I will never forget. I will never forget the exact wording that we were taught, that Adam is one who can show blood in the face, and those who did not come from Adam came from the blackest heart of the devil and will be judged accordingly. Afrikaner nationalism. Yay. Rooted in colorism. We need to have a lecture on the history of race, and racism. Please look up Gomes de Surara. I think we should do that in the server. Considering Adam was most probably a person of color, yeah. Let me just reply to this. Yeah, look up Gomes de Surara in the meantime. Zurara, I think it is pronounced. Jesus, yeah. I love this time of year when white people complain about the brown immigrants and Islam and Middle Eastern people and all of that, and have scenes of the nativity on their front lawns with brown people represented as white. Again, I quote, the Eve gene is only found in black women. Yep. I quote Haley Williams, who is a cousin. They say lesser than them. But white privilege really is an absence. It's not something that you can pinpoint. It is the things that you don't have to go through. So it's so difficult to describe an absence, and white privilege is an absence of the negative consequences of racism, an absence of structural discrimination, an absence of your race being viewed as a problem first and foremost, an absence of less likely to succeed because of my race, It's an absence of funny looks directed at you because you believe to be in the wrong place, an absence of cultural expectations, an absence of violence enacted on your ancestors because of the color of their skin, an absence of a lifetime of subtle marginalization and othering, exclusion from the narrative of being human. I actually need to have a chat with you today. Let me know when. Don't worry, you're not in trouble. Oh, absolutely. Making Jesus white was completely 100% intentional. Describing and defining this absence means to some extent upsetting the centering of whiteness and reminding white people that their experience is not the norm for the rest of us. It is, of course, much easier to identify when you don't have it, and I watch as an outsider to the insularity of whiteness. I coveted whiteness once, but I knew at the back of my mind that conning myself into assimilation would only ever make me a poor imitation of what I would never be. And that is powerful. That is incredibly powerful, because I think every single person of color at some point in life, I said, you know what, it's just easier. Let me just assimilate because it's just easier. And then that sudden realization, or that slow realization, or however that realization came to you, you might be surprised to learn that it was a white man who first gave white privilege, led him to start exploring what he called white skin privilege. The realization comes. 19 was a terrible year. Terrible vintage. He was an anti-capitalist. His was an anti-capitalist perspective on race in the labor movement. In 1967, riffing on the civil rights movement's much-used phrase, an injury to one is an injury to all, he wrote, "The injury dealt out to the black worker has its counterpart in the privilege of the white worker. To expect the white worker to help wipe out the injury to the Negro is to ask him to oppose his own interests." Wow. To some, the word privilege in the context of whiteness invokes images of a life lived in the lap of luxury, enjoying the spoils of the super rich. When I talk about white privilege, I don't mean that white people have it easy or they've never struggled. And it pisses me the fuck off that we always have to have this caveat. That whiteness is so fucking fragile that this caveat is always so stupidly necessary. I hate it. Like, no, I'm not saying that you... No, what I'm saying is that you didn't have to struggle. As black and brown people do. White people insist on the caveat so hard that they make life very, very difficult for people who don't use it. Just like the "it's not all men" crowd. White privilege is the fact if you're white, your race will almost certainly positively impact your life trajectory in some way, and you probably won't even notice it. Absolutely. Like white women who vote against their interest to support white men. The thing is that they're supporting patriarchy. Yep, it is all men. They're supporting patriarchy in supporting their leaning into their white supremacy, but that's another topic for another day. It is linked, but absolutely. White privilege is one of the reasons why I stopped talking to white people about race. Trying to convince stony faces of disbelief has never appealed to me. The idea of white privilege forces white people who aren't actively racist to confront their own complicity in its continuing existence. White privilege is dull, grinding complacency. It's par for the course in a world in which drastic race inequality is responded to with a shoulder shrug, considered just the way it is. We could all... I found the only way to keep costs down and still make it to work was get the train halfway, cycle for the rest of the journey. An uncomfortable truth dawned on me as I lugged my bike up and down flights of stairs in commuter town train stations. The majority of public transport I'd been traveling on was not easily accessible. No ramps, lifts, nigh on impossible to access for parents with buggies or people using wheelchairs or people with mobility issues like a frame or a cane. Before I had my own wheels to carry, I'd never noticed this problem. I'd been oblivious to the fact that this lack of accessibility was affecting hundreds of people, and it was only when the issue became close to me that I began to feel infuriated by it. I have to be honest with myself. When I write as an outsider, I'm also an insider in so many ways. University educated, able-bodied, speak and write in ways similar to those I criticize, walking and talking like them. And part of this is why I am taken seriously. As I write about shattering perspectives and disrupting for objectivity, I have to remember that there are factors in my life that bolster my voice above others. And that is an incredible realization. I've been writing some of these ideas for years. Of course, it is a person from the global north who gets credited with that idea. Works. Racism is often confused with prejudice and is sometimes used interchangeably. It's another retort wielded against anti-racists who have to listen to those who wish to undermine the movement to muster up outrage about discrimination against white people because they are white. Let me just say that the only reverse racism that exists is the kind where you back up over a racist just to make sure. Exactly, Lime Gem. They fear retaliation. Prejudice is real across communities of color. Years ago, buying myself a lunch of Caribbean food, I was greeted by a smiling owner behind the counter who waited until his white customers left before confiding in me that he saves the best cuts of people like us. Cuts of meat for people like us. Yes, that man was prejudiced. Yes, my lunch was delicious. No, the owner of the cafe could not possibly affect the life chances of his white customers with his feelings against them. All he could affect, in any terms, was their lunch. This is the difference between racism and prejudice. There is an unattributed definition of racism that defines it as prejudice plus power. Those disadvantaged by racism can certainly be cruel, vindictive, and prejudiced. Everyone has the capacity to be nasty to other people, to judge them before they get to know them. But there simply aren't enough black people in positions of power to enact racism against white people on the kind of grand scale it currently operates at against black people. Are black people overrepresented in places and spaces where prejudice could likely take effect? The answer. A few years ago, I got into a conversation with a friend's white French girlfriend about racism. Speaking to her honestly about my experience, it was going well, and she was telling me about the trouble she faced as the youngest and only woman in her workplace, often having to work twice as hard to prove herself competent to her employers. We were getting along and we found we had common ground. I told her about an experience of being passed over for a job I'd interviewed for and finding out through mutual friends that the position had gone to a white woman my age with identical experience to me. I had felt the slap in the face of structural racism, but the kind of thing you only hear about in statistics, about black unemployment, but never about the people affected by it. And then she said, "You don't know if it was racism. How do you know it wasn't something else?" She told me about her anger and fear of being accused of racism by an Algerian man, saying how angry it made her feel that people can use accusations of racism to stop white people from talking, that maybe the man should have considered that people just didn't like him because he didn't behave well. She said she felt intimidated because he was a man and she thought he might get aggressive. I was naive. We had resonated beforehand, so I had good faith in her humanity, and I thought she might be able to accept the structural conditions that allowed a situation like this one to happen. So I tried to encourage her to consider the suspicion of anger of a person who has suffered racism in their entire lives, thinking that I might be able to persuade her to think outside of herself and question the wider context. But then every sentence she said sounded like every word I've heard from people defending whiteness. It's like they all learned lines from the same sheet. Fuck the French. Oh yeah, behave. Best joke I've heard this year. Yeah, Taro. It's one of my favorites. I need to call something. So, even somebody who understands structural disadvantages in any other sense will still defend whiteness. Because white, every single thing that can be leveled against them. And they use whiteness as a cudgel. And we have seen it time and time again. We have seen it all too often for people to ignore it. Then I considered the social implications of the logical outcome of our exchange, where the consensus would be that I am wrong because that's how the white status quo maintains itself. If I had argued with her, I would put myself at risk of no longer being welcome in that particular house share because I would have created an atmosphere. Oh, I have heard that so many times. Because privilege, yeah. They have the privilege to make our lives hell. They have the platforms to make our lives hell. They have the ability to be considered always innocent. So they make our lives hell. Because they can. When they don't get what they want. They will always make our lives hell first. Sympathize. Whiteness and white people who buy into whiteness bully us into silence. And it's happening right now with one of my most favorite people. White privilege manifests itself in everyone and no one. Everyone is complicit, but no one wants to take on responsibility. Challenging it can have real social implications because it's a many-headed hydra. You have to be careful about the white people you trust when it comes to discussing race and racism. You have to be careful about trusting white people, period. You don't have the privilege of approaching conversations about racism with the assumption that the other participants will be on the same plane as you. Raising racism in a conversation is like flicking a switch. It doesn't matter if it's a person you've just met or you've always felt safe and comfortable with. You are never sure when a conversation about race and racism will turn into one where you're scared for your physical safety or your social position. Oh yeah, no, I know you know. It's just. Yep. They have fucked up the world. It has always been white people. And it's always been men. Because you see, when we say it's all men, how similar that sounds. It doesn't matter if it's a person you've just met or a person you've always felt safe and comfortable with. You're never sure whether a conversation will turn into one where you're scared for your physical safety or social position. It is whiteness, it is men. Yes, tarot, gender seems very similar. Abso-fucking-lutely. White privilege is a manipulative, suffocating blanket of power that envelops everything we know, like a snowy day. 9 million players in 2 weeks? Oh, white woman tears are always dangerous, Melissa. It's brutal and oppressive, bullying you into not speaking up for fear of losing loved ones, a job, or an apartment. It scares you into silencing yourself, you not getting the privilege of speaking honestly about your feelings without extensively assessing the consequences. I spent a lot of time biting my tongue so hard it might fall off. And I'm going to take a wee break then. Yes, Melissa, white woman tears, incredibly, incredibly dangerous. Yep. A wee break. No, not one to use the little they them's room. I damaged my lungs. I'll be right back, Twitch and YouTube. So, welcome back, YouTube and Twitch. I just need to warm my feet for a bit. And I know that my foot heater is really loud. I don't like socks. I like having funky socks, but I can't wear them for long. I don't like my feet being closed. Oh, that is expensive. Jeez. If you're not following everybody else in here, please give people a follow. These are all good people in here. We have really good conversation going on. Thank you. Yeah, give everybody else a follow, and let's continue these really necessary conversations. Wizz Air? I've never heard of that. Okay, I'm going to read up until where she starts talking about anti-racism. Okay. So just 2 more pages. Some people prefer their feet naked for their ancestors. Yeah, absolutely. Extra legroom, a 3rd piece of luggage. See, because I was traveling, I had just a backpack, so I was okay. Challenging it can racism online. I've experienced that. Hey, who more do? Interviewing for an admin job a few years ago, I was confronted by a potential colleague about something I tweeted about race. Considering it was such a low-ranking position, I didn't think such an intervention was necessary. White privilege is deviously, throat-stranglingly clever because it owns the companies that recruit you, owns the industries you want to enter, so that if you need money to live, you're forced to appease its needs. I locked my Twitter account after that incident, and I didn't let any conversations go beyond small talk in other jobs. It eases you into letting your guard down with white people, assured that you'll be taken seriously, but simultaneously not being surprised when a conversation highlights your difference against your white peers. White privilege is the perverse situation of feeling more comfortable with openly racist, far-right extremists because at least you know where you stand with them. The boundaries are clear. The insidious stuff is much harder. You come to expect it, but you can never come to accept it. You learn to be careful about your battles, because otherwise people would consider you to be angry for no reason at all. A troublemaker not worth taking seriously. An angry black woman obsessed with race. And they love to say, oh, victim mentality, victim mentality. I say to them, if you're saying that I have victim mentality, how come you're fine with having perpetrator mentality? Hi, Autumn. Back in January 2012, a mere 2 days after 2 of Stephen Lawrence's killers had been sentenced to life imprisonment, somewhat of a Twitter storm was circling around one of Britain's few black female members of parliament. In a conversation on Twitter, Diane Abbott, MP for Hackney North and Stoke Newington, was exchanging thoughts on media coverage around the verdict with journalist Bim Awedunmi. It took just one tweet to inadvertently spark one of the biggest furors regarding racism against white people. Quote, in the course of tweeting the events around the trial, conviction and sentencing of Gary Dobson and David Norris for the murder of Stephen Lawrence. I expanded a follow-up, clarifying my black community tweet. I hate the generally lazy thinking behind the use of the term. Same for black community leaders. This led to a reply from my local MP, Diane Abbott, which said, "I understand the cultural point you're making, but you are playing into a divide and rule agenda," which is bullshit. We went back and forth for a few tweets more, and then Abbott sent out a tweet that caused the furor. "White people love playing divide and rule. We should not play their game. Tactics as old as colonialism," unquote. Exactly, Moss. 100%. TV news, the news story was about racism against white people because they always want to make it about themselves. Always. Racism goes both ways, Abbott's detractors insisted. Writing in the Daily Telegraph, journalist Toby Young wrote, "Imagine the uproar if an equally prominent white conservative MP said something similar about black people on Twitter. It is not the fucking same. Whenever people said, imagine if I said that about black people, imagine if I said that about brown people, yeah, you have spaces. This is why we have to gatekeep our own cultures. This is why we have to gatekeep our own practices. This is why we have to gate for centuries." Even Diane's Labour Party allies, while defending her, couldn't help but describe her tone as robust and combative. As if their problem was with the tone of her tweet, rather than the injustice it was confronting. It's always the tone police. And while Britain's white conservatives were insisting that this was reverse racism that was as unforgivable as murdering an unarmed black teenager, Britain's white liberals were terribly concerned that Abbott's harsh phrasing might undo all of her hard work, insisting that adding the word "some" to her tweet might have softened the impact. No, I'm never going to add some. Some white people, some men. I'm not going to soften my language. I'm never going to make my feminism or my anti-racism comfortable for you. So yeah, I am the number one rallier against white woman tears. Thank you, Jess. I wear that badge proudly. Some white people, all white people, or none, it wouldn't have mattered in the end. The aim of these commentators, whether they know it or not, there's a lot to talk about, a lot to catch up on. It was to obscure, to derail, to ardently avoid the wider issue. When it comes to looking at the numbers in the UK's bastions of influences, those that shape national politics and set political agendas, the conclusions to be drawn are clear. The official numbers from the House of Commons shows that 94% of members of Parliament are white. The visible deference of Diane Abbott, one of the few black women in Parliament who said something very much outside the realm of white agreeableness, is glaringly obvious, and she paid the price for rocking the boat. The news cycle changed so suddenly, though. It wasn't about imagined horrors of racism against white people. This multi-pronged takedown of one of Britain's most prominent black MPs was much more cynical. It was about what academics Alana Lenton and Gavin Titley called white victimhood, an effort by the powers that be to divert conversations about the effects of structural racism in order to shield whiteness from much-needed, rigorous criticism. The Stephen Lawrence trial was perhaps the closest Britain ever came to national conversation on the insidious nature of structural racism and how it manifests as a collective mindset, partly through malice, partly through carelessness and ignorance, to quietly assist some while hindering others, but by flipping the debate to one that focused solely on racism against white people. That national conversation was swiftly stopped. of course it had to be stopped by whiteness, because they couldn't have that conversation. No longer was there potential for us as a nation to examine the impact of the legacy of Britain's racism. Instead, we were reminded by lots of very important people that racism goes both ways. No, it doesn't. In snatching away the possibility of a long overdue conversation, the resulting warped debate revealed an obsession with stopping discussion about race in Britain. The effect was as old as colonialism, as Abbott said. Pointing out how this country has wielded divide and rule as a political strategy is then considered an attack on the very fabric of British sensibilities. The backlash against Diane Abbott wasn't about defending an embattled group of people who are constantly maligned in the media we consume every day. Instead, this reverse racism row was about the British press closing ranks and around what was in its interests to protect whiteness as a faux neutral, objective power. Thank you so much. Whiteness in the press had positioned itself for too long as self-appointed, self-referential arbiter of racial problems, in which it pondered why these black and brown communities were so prone to violence and poverty without a shred of self-awareness. I went to England in 2017 for a wedding. And, hey, a British person asked me, a white Brit asked me, how come there are Indian people in Africa? Do they not know their own history? It's called Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Reni Eddo-Lodge. They don't learn their own history. They were never told from India, kidnapped from India and taken to work in the farms in British-ruled African countries. They didn't know. Because if they actually learned history, they would realize that they're the bad guys. And we can't have that, can we? In 2012, the conviction of Lawrence's murderers could have sparked a national conversation about race. We could have had a conversation about the police's failure of Stephen's family as they fought for justice. In 2016, the results from an investigation by the Independent Police Complaints Commission found that while the police were bungling the investigation, an undercover officer was spying on the Lawrence family. Okay, thank you to B for the one on the PayPal saying a man came into the ER with 24 horses up his ass. The doctors listed his condition as stable. B, if I didn't love you so much, I would block you. Jesus. Oh no, Cleo, the condensation. Where's the coast of Idaho, please? Where's the coast of Idaho? We could have asked ourselves honestly, as a country, if taking 2 decades to convict just 2 of the gang who murdered an innocent teenager was acceptable. We could have asked ourselves if we were ashamed of that. Maybe we could have spoken about the fact that racism had only been a political priority for less than half a century. We could have had a conversation about how to start eliminating racism. We could have started asking each other about the best way to heal. It could have been pivotal. Instead, the conversation we had was about racism against white people, because white people always need to fucking center themselves. Racism does not go both ways. There are unique forms of discrimination that are backed up by entitlement, assertion, and most importantly, supported by a structural power strong enough to scare you into complying with the demands of the status quo. And we have to recognize this. And that is... Jesus B. Why are you like this? I almost cracked that spine. I have a friend named Yogini who is not just a book lover but a book collector. As in, like, she collects like rare and special edition copies of books and stuff like that. And if she sees me cracking the spine of books, no. It's the tism humor. If there are no questions from Twitch and from YouTube, I will say goodnight to you here. Thank you so much for being here. Remember to visit my Linktree and throw some financial love my way, because we live in a capitalist hellscape, and I cannot. I just can't. Especially when white women fuck with your income. 100 gift goal. You can put it through the Pal of Pays app. And if you can afford to, please subscribe to my Patreon. It is $1, $5, $10, or $20 a month. And your tiers, what you get increases as you go up on the tiers. And hopefully the goal is now 99. All of your ones are going towards feeding people though. So that's the thing. Yeah. I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah. And remember, if you are not caught up with the books, all of these recordings are available on Twitch and YouTube as well. So yay! I shall see you tomorrow. Same time, different book. Actually, I think I'm going to be on around 11 o'clock tomorrow as well, because I've got a lot to do around the house. So I shall see you at 11 p.m. South African Standard Time to read Orientalism by Edward Said. Yay! And I shall see you all then. Bye!